My name is Diana. At 32, I run operations for a restaurant group that seats 3,000 guests a week across 4 locations. I understand the path of a check from kitchen to table the way most people understand tying their shoes. So when my parents broke 3 years of complete silence and invited me to dinner to make amends, I should have asked one question before agreeing. Who would actually be sitting at that table? I didn't. I drove 40 minutes to the Belvedere, walked through the front doors, and found 16 members of my family already seated around a long table covered in lobster tails, Wagyu steaks, and a $400 bottle of Bordeaux they had begun pouring before I even parked. My father looked up from the head of the table, smiled, and said the words I had spent a lifetime earning. "You're paying, right? You owe us that much." He believed he had cornered me. He had not counted on the 2 sentences I was about to whisper to our waiter, or on what his own credit card would reveal to the entire family 15 minutes later. Welcome back to Calm Drama Stories, where ordinary people face impossible family moments and leave with their dignity intact. If you have ever been the one expected to pay, to fix, or to stay silent, this story is for you. Drop a comment and subscribe. Let me go back a few weeks, before the dinner, before the parking lot full of familiar cars, before my father tried to hand me a bill the size of a mortgage payment. I need you to understand who I was the morning that invitation arrived, the version of me they were counting on, and the version I had already stopped being. I managed 4 restaurants. I did not own them, I managed them. I climbed from bussing tables at a Knoxville steakhouse at 17, still smelling of fryer oil on the school bus the next morning, to hostess at 19, server at 21, floor manager at 24, and regional operations director by 30. I am not wealthy. I have a paid-off 2-bedroom condo, a retirement account I never touch, and exactly one small indulgence: sparkling water. Still or sparkling, that is all I order when I eat out. My staff thinks it's a quirk. It is not. When you grow up covering everyone else's steak, you learn to keep your own tab small enough to walk away from. That Tuesday morning, I sat in my office reviewing a vendor contract for imported olive oil, the kind of ordinary day that makes you forget not every life runs on spreadsheets. My phone buzzed. I looked down and felt something cold settle behind my ribs. After 3 years of silence, a notification appeared from the group chat I had been removed from the day I became the family villain. Family had added me back. I stared at the little red heart emoji my mother had chosen 6 years earlier, when the group still shared Thanksgiving recipes and photos of Brooke's dog. I had not seen that heart in 3 years. The chat history was clean, nothing above my mother's newest message, which meant they either cleared it or, more likely, kept a second group without me the entire time. Her message was warm, careful, almost rehearsed. She and Dad had been reflecting and wanted to invite me to dinner at the Belvedere to begin healing as a family. Just the 4 of us, her, Dad, me, and Brooke. A small dinner, a fresh start. 30 seconds later, a second message arrived with the line that should have told me everything. "Family takes care of family, sweetheart. It's time we remembered that." Family takes care of family. She used to say those words when I was 19 and she needed my server tips for the electric bill. She said them when I was 23 and Dad needed a cosigner on the truck. She said them when Brooke's first apartment fell through and I quietly paid the deposit. In our house, those 5 words had always meant Diana takes care of the family. I read the message twice. I noticed my mother had not said sorry. She had not said we were wrong. She had said it was time to heal. Passive voice, no subject, no one responsible. I typed back, "I'll be there." Then I set the phone face down and returned to the olive oil contract, pretending my hands were steady. 3 years earlier, Brooke decided to open a cafe. Not a business plan, not a market study, just a cafe because she had seen one in Charleston with exposed brick and a matcha menu and thought she could do the same. She was 26, had never managed so much as a lemonade stand, and needed a $75,000 small business loan. The bank said yes with a cosigner. That cosigner was supposed to be me. Mom called on a Sunday. Dad sat beside her, already angry before I answered. Brooke needed the loan. Her dream was the cafe. I had good credit, a steady job, a history of saying yes. Just sign the papers. I asked to see the business plan first. Brooke did not have one. I asked about projected margins, lease terms, supplier contracts. Brooke stared at me as if I had insulted her cooking. Mom's voice went flat. She's your sister. You don't need a spreadsheet to love your sister. I said no, not because I didn't love Brooke, but because I'd spent enough years in restaurants watching people pour savings into concepts with no foundation. I knew what $75,000 of someone else's debt looked like at 3 in the morning when the cafe was dark and the loan was still due. Dad stood up, pointed at the door, and said the words that closed it for 3 years. If you won't help this family, you're not part of it. I drove home. The next morning, I had been removed from the family group. Nobody called, nobody texted. For 3 years, I was the daughter who loved money more than her own sister. Here is the part that's hard to admit. The silence almost broke me, not because they were right, but because I missed being needed. That was the real wound. It took 2 years and a therapist named Dr. Kwan to name it properly. I had been the family fixer since I was 17. First paycheck went to groceries, tax refund paid for Mom's dental work. When Dad's transmission failed, I covered the rebuild and told him it was under warranty, so he wouldn't have to accept a handout from his 22-year-old daughter. When Brooke got married, I paid for the florist, the photographer, and half the reception, then smiled while Mom gave a toast about raising 2 strong girls. 2 strong girls, 1 bill.
I did not do it because I was generous. I did it because somewhere around age 15, I learned that the fastest way to keep peace in my family was to make sure nobody had to ask twice. Ask once, Diana pays, everyone is happy, dinner stays quiet. I trained them. I taught my parents that my wallet was a vending machine. Insert guilt, receive check. When the machine finally said out of order, they did not troubleshoot it. They unplugged it and walked away. So when Mom's message appeared after 3 years, family takes care of family, sweetheart, the old reflex fired in my chest like a muscle I had not stretched in years. Go fix it. Pay whatever it costs. Make it quiet again. But I also heard Dr. Kwan's voice, steady as a metronome. You taught them you would always pay. That was your mistake to fix, not by paying more, but by stopping. My coworker Jess told me not to go. She sat across from me at lunch the day after the invitation and said, "Diana, this has ambush written all over it." I laughed because Jess had never met my family and still saw it clearer than I could. My sous chef Marco said the same thing, shorter, don't. But I had already decided, not because I believed them, not because I expected an apology. I wanted to sit across from my parents and learn whether 3 years had changed anything, or whether the silence had simply been a longer version of the same conversation we had always had, one in which I was expected to listen, agree, and pay. I wanted closure, even if closure meant confirming the door was nailed shut. There was something else, too, and I will be honest about it because some of you will understand. I missed my mother, not the one who orchestrated and kept score, but the one who taught me to make cornbread in a cast-iron skillet when I was 9 and sang along with Dolly Parton while the butter melted. That mother had not called in 3 years either. Some nights I still heard the Dolly Parton. I told Jess I was going. I told Marco I would be fine. I told myself the same thing and almost believed it. I set one rule, 1 dinner, civil, no money. If it felt wrong, I would leave before dessert. I wrote it on a sticky note and pressed it to my steering wheel the morning of the dinner. 1 dinner, then home. That sticky note was still there when I pulled into the Belvedere's parking lot and counted the cars. I dressed simply on purpose: black slacks, a gray blouse I wear to vendor meetings, flat shoes, no jewelry except the small silver watch I bought myself the year I made regional director. Not because I wanted to impress anyone, but because I had earned it and it kept good time, and that felt like enough. I did not want to walk into the Belvedere looking as if I were performing. My family already thought I flaunted my success. The truth was, I drove a 9-year-old Honda and meal prepped on Sundays like half of America. The drive took 40 minutes. I played no music. My hand stayed at 10 and 2. Somewhere around the highway merge, my stomach tightened in a way I recognized, the same feeling I get when a walk-in cooler fails on a Friday night and I know the next 6 hours will hurt. Instinct. My body knew something my brain was still negotiating. I almost turned around at the exit ramp. Almost. But I thought about that cornbread, and I thought about Dr. Kwan's voice, and I kept driving. The Belvedere sat at the end of a strip of shops I had not visited in years, the expensive side of town, the kind of place where the parking lot is landscaped and the hostesses wear all black. Dad's truck was in the 3rd row, Mom's sedan next to it. Fine. Then I saw Aunt Linda's white Buick, Uncle Greg's SUV, Brooke's hatchback with the bumper sticker from the cafe that closed 11 months after it opened. 3 more cars I recognized, 2 I did not. My stomach dropped before I even opened the door. Just the 4 of us, Mom had written. I counted 9 vehicles. I sat in my car for 2 full minutes, engine off, hands on the wheel, reading that sticky note. 1 dinner, then home. The smart thing would have been to reverse out of the lot, drive the 40 minutes back to my condo, eat leftover soup, and never think about the Mayfield family reunion I had not been invited to, or apparently been invited to without being told the guest list. But I got out. I straightened my blouse, I locked my car, and walked toward the entrance, because I was 32 years old, and I had spent 3 years learning how not to run, and I was not going to start running again in a restaurant parking lot on a Thursday evening. The front doors were heavy glass with brass handles, the kind that whisper entry prices start at $42 before you even see a menu. Inside, the lobby smelled like rosemary, warm bread, and money. A hostess in a black dress smiled and checked her screen. Mayfield. I nodded. She nodded. Your party's already seated. She said it the way hostesses speak when they've been dealing with a large group for an hour and are trying very hard not to look stressed. I recognized the expression. I had worn it myself 1,000 times. She grabbed a single menu and led me toward the back of the dining room. I could hear them before I could see them, laughter, clinking glasses, my Aunt Linda's unmistakable cackle cutting through the murmur of every other table. 1 dinner, then home. I turned the corner and saw the table. 16 chairs, every single one filled except the one at the far end, directly across from my father. The table stretched the entire length of the private dining alcove. White linen, heavy silverware, candles and low crystal holders. There were platters I could identify from 10 feet away, lobster tails fanned across crushed ice, Wagyu sliders on a tiered stand, a charcuterie board the size of a coffee table, and in the center a bottle of wine I recognized from vendor tastings, a 2016 Santa Gru, retail around $400, already half empty. They had been here a while. They had been ordering hard. The hostess paused at the edge of the alcove and glanced at me with a look that translated perfectly across every restaurant I have ever worked in. Good luck. Then she leaned closer and said quietly, "Your father put a card down to hold the reservation. Just so you know, we require one for parties over 12. I filed that sentence like I file every operational detail, silently, completely, permanently. His card was on file, he had secured the table, and yet somehow I already knew the bill was not supposed to land on him. My mother saw me first. She stood up with both arms open and every head at the table turned. "Diana! Oh, sweetheart, look at you!" Applause. Actual applause, as if I were a returning soldier and not the daughter they had ghosted for 1,000 days. Uncle Greg whistled. Aunt Linda dabbed her eyes with a cloth napkin. Brooke raised her wine glass and smiled, the kind of smile that has teeth but no warmth. 16 people, lobster and wagyu and a $400 bottle of Bordeaux, just the four of us, Mom had written. I sat down. What else do you do when 16 people are watching you and the chair is already pulled out and a waiter is pouring water into your glass before your purse hits the floor? I sat down and I smiled because 15 years of front-of-house training gives you the ability to smile while your brain runs threat assessment at full speed. Mom settled back into her seat, beaming. We wanted it to be a surprise, the whole family together, just like old times. I thought it was just the four of us, I said. Mom waved her hand as if swatting a fly. Well, once Linda heard, and then Greg, and then your cousin Tara, it just grew. You know how family is. I knew exactly how family was. I scanned the table. Dad sat at the head, carving a Wagyu slider as if it were Thanksgiving turkey. Brooke sat to his left, phone in one hand, wine in the other, scrolling something I couldn't see. Aunt Linda and Uncle Greg anchored the middle. Cousins I hadn't spoken to since a Thanksgiving 5 years earlier filled the rest. Tyler, Megan, Jake, 2 wives I had met once, and Aunt Linda's neighbor whom I had never seen before in my life, but apparently was eating lobster on whatever occasion this was. The wine was flowing, the platters were half demolished. They had been here at least an hour before I arrived, and they had ordered everything on the menu that did not require a second mortgage. Mom leaned across and squeezed my hand. See, family takes care of family. There it was again, the same 5 words delivered with the same warm packaging, aimed at the same target. I squeezed back and said nothing. I was counting plates. My father is the kind of man who orders for the table, not asks, orders. He waved the waiter over, a young guy barely out of his teens who looked like he was running on caffeine and anxiety, and rattled off additions without glancing at a menu. Another round of the lobster tails, 2 more Wagyu plates, and bring another bottle of that Bordeaux, the good one, he said, loud enough for the tables on either side of us to hear. Dad pulled his credit card from his wallet and held it between 2 fingers like a magician showing the audience a coin before the trick. Put it all on this, he told the waiter. We're celebrating tonight.
The waiter, his name tag read Nathan, scribbled, nodded, and disappeared toward the kitchen with the look of someone who desperately wanted a smoke break. I watched my father tuck the card back into his wallet with a little pat, the way you pat a dog that has performed well. Something was off. I had grown up watching Dad argue over the price of a muffler. I had seen him return a shirt because the sale tag was missing. Raymond Mayfield did not order $400 bottles of wine. He did not wave credit cards like flags. This was a performance, and it was aimed at me. Look how well we are doing, Diana. Look how little we needed you. Except the car in the parking lot was the same truck from 5 years ago, with a dent in the rear quarter panel he had never fixed, and Mom's handbag, the Coach purse she had carried since I was in high school, sat on the chair beside her with a cracked strap held together by a safety pin. They were performing, I just did not know the price of admission yet. The small cuts started around the second bottle. Aunt Linda leaned across Uncle Greg and said, "Must be nice running all those fancy restaurants while the rest of us clip coupons." She laughed when she said it, the way people laugh when they want you to know they are serious. Cousin Megan asked if I ever felt guilty living so well while my parents were going through a rough patch. I did not know about a rough patch. Nobody had told me about a rough patch. Brooke, without looking up from her phone, added, "She wouldn't know. She hasn't been around." Each comment landed with the precision of something rehearsed, not scripted exactly, but aligned the way a choir finds the same note without a conductor. They had been talking about me, about my absence, my money, my life, and they had arrived tonight with a shared understanding of the story. Diana left. Diana has plenty. Diana owes. Aunt Linda delivered the thesis statement. She reached across the table, took my hand as if she were comforting me at a funeral, and said, "Family doesn't keep score, dear." I almost laughed. Family doesn't keep score. This from a woman who once stopped speaking to her own daughter-in-law for 6 months over a Thanksgiving seating arrangement. I did not laugh. I pulled my hand back gently and picked up my glass. Sparkling water, the only thing in front of me, the only thing I had ordered. The contrast was almost funny. 16 people swimming in lobster and Bordeaux, and me with a glass of San Pellegrino sitting at the end of the table like a designated driver at a bachelor party. Nathan, the young waiter, passed behind me, and I caught his eye. "Just the water tonight?" he asked quietly. "Just the water," I said. He nodded as if he understood something I had not said out loud. Let me tell you about Nathan. He was maybe 19 or 20, built thin the way restaurant kids are before they learn to eat between rushes. He moved fast but careful, the way new servers do when the table is too big and the order is too complicated, and they know one wrong plate means a manager conversation they cannot afford. I recognized everything about him because I had been him. 17 years old, 2 tables deep, learning that the guests who snap their fingers are always the ones who tip the least. He was handling our 16 top alone. Well, almost alone. A busser appeared occasionally to clear plates, but Nathan was running every order, every refill, every "excuse me, can we get more butter" from Aunt Linda, who had said it 3 times in 20 minutes. He never complained, he never sighed, he refilled my sparkling water without being asked, and when he set the glass back down, he caught me watching the table with an expression I probably should have hidden better. "Long night," he murmured. I almost told him the truth. Instead, I just said, "You're doing great." He blinked, startled, as if he had forgotten customers could say that. Then he straightened up about half an inch taller and moved on to Uncle Greg's refill. I watched him go and thought about the version of me that used to carry 4 plates up her forearm and cry in the walk-in freezer on the hard nights. That girl had no idea she would end up on the other side of a table like this.